Let's make it our business. A climate podcast that's about innovators, change makers, and entrepreneurs who are taking actions, creating solutions, and inspiring many. This podcast is supported by US Department of State, created by BBC Media Action, India.
Hello, I'm Sayema and welcome to this special episode of Cool It Down, where we will explore the intersection between climate and health. To enliven this conversation and connect the dots on why we need to cool it down and how we can, we have some incredible voices joining us. And I won't reveal it this one time. Keep listening. My first guest on the podcast today is someone who has seamlessly blended her roles as an actor, influencer, and an unwavering advocate for the environment. Dia Mirza. Known for her grace, compassion, and commitment to sustainability, Dia has been an inspiring voice for environmental action, not just in India, but globally. She's someone who doesn't just talk the talk, but walks it, championing causes that aim to make the world a healthier, more equitable place. Dia, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Let's dive into this vital conversation about cooling it down literally and metaphorically.
Thank you for having me, Sayema, and I'm so grateful that we're having these conversations. So thank you for Cool It Down.
Absolutely. Dia, could you tell us what drives your passion for this cause and how you connect with the idea of Cool It Down on a personal level? And when did it all begin?
I think one could trace it back to childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And my early influences and understanding of the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. I went to a very beautiful school in Hyderabad that was based on the philosophy of J. Krishnamurti.
Mm-hmm.
The school was called Vidyaranya, which translated to English means Forest of Education.
Right.
And the alarm bells for climate change had started to ring in the year of my birth, coincidentally. 1981. And there was a lot of discourse on this subject in school. Of course, the terminology may have been different, but there was a lot of effort made to draw our attention and, of course, create action by all of us in school to firstly and most importantly understand that everything that we consume comes from the earth.
Right.
And that the unsustainable production and wasteful production was causing an imbalance in the planetary systems, in the climate. And that would, in the future, lead to, all kinds of devastation and destruction and the eventual extinction of human beings if we continued on the path that we were on. And this was, discussed at length through assemblies over the years, worked very closely with the earth. We grew food, we composted, we refused plastics. Plastics hadn't really arrived the way they have in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
But in the 80s and 90s, when I was growing up, plastics had begun to enter the market, and we had a no plastics policy in school, and at home my mom never used any form of plastic packaging or anything for storage.
Wow.
In plastic. We had metal buckets and mugs for our baths. Anyway, long story short, I think it was a contribution and a combination of the schooling, the mindset that my parents had, the understanding that they had in some way or the other of what was happening in the world and how we as people needed to be conscious of our consumerism or our consumption and understand that there needed to be, respect for all resources. And we should avoid being wasteful as much as possible. Now, all this was wonderful through school, and I was, I understood it well. I practiced many of the things that we were taught. I remember waiting for my pencil to, become the size of my thumb before I, go.
Right.
Because I
Yeah.
didn't want to be wasteful and I wanted to conserve everything that I had.
Wow.
So yeah, I took it very seriously. And I think that is the power of childhood, right? You understand something really well. You're able to then demonstrate that in action and it then starts reflecting in all your choices. But much like, everyone else and most of us, we get sucked into a system which is designed by a capitalist economy that has been
Right.
created to make us into wasteful consumers. The idea that success means more clothes, more
Yeah.
shoes, more rubbish that you
Yes.
don't really need. So I went through that phase. I won't deny it. When I first started earning a lot of money, I went crazy. I bought rubbish. I bought stuff that I didn't need. And I turned into a wasteful consumer. And it was in the early 2000s, I think it was 2003 or 4. I had the good fortune of being on something that NDTV did back then called the Tigerthon.
Yes.
And it was a fantastic initiative that brought serious change makers on the ground in contact with people like us, film people. And I remember visiting a forest in my adult life. And that experience changed me completely, Sayema. I think it kind of reminded me everything that I had forgotten.
Right.
It took me back to my roots, and I was able to draw many connections between what was going wrong around us and what I could do, how I could use my influence. First, of course, by learning myself and understanding what was happening, and then being able to share that. So, the visit to the forest page,
yeah.
Madhya Pradesh, witnessing a tigress on the hunt, engaging with the forest rangers and the forest officers, understanding from people like Bittu Sehgal and Vivek Menon what extraordinary work was happening in silos, so away from mainstream media, and how in some way perhaps I could be a bridge between this amazing work they were doing and the mainstream humor. And that just set me off on a path. And as I've learned, I've shared and imbibed and tried to practice everything that I've discovered. But I think the most native idea really is something that we're all born with an understanding of, which is this deep connection with nature, love for it. I see it in the eyes of my children every time they're around nature. And I think it's the most innate thing we have because we are a part of nature by design.
Exactly.
We
Right.
were never meant to live
Absolutely.
as separate as we have.
Yeah.
Human beings are the only species that have built walls. And for some reason, we think that we are separate from the natural world. When in fact we're not. So yeah,
it's
been
fascinating how your upbringing, it was introduced, then it stayed on, and one visit back to the forest just reignited the entire thing. And really, at this point of time, I must emphasize it is so important for the grown-ups to expose the children and introduce them to nature from where they've come very early on in life, so that connection is built over the years. The clock is ticking in our fight against climate change. Maybe, a common person who is listening to us right now, trying to understand the urgency, cannot touch and feel the impact of climate crises. If we were to make him or her understand about how, all this is directly impacting, let's say, our health, what are the examples that you would want to cite where the climate change is directly tied to our health and well-being, and we can see that getting affected?
Okay. So it doesn't matter what part of the world you belong to. There is increased uh, evidence of the triple planetary crisis, which is how we define it. So it's not just climate change. There is pollution and biodiversity loss.
Right.
So biodiversity loss is something that very, very possibly could have led to COVID.
Wow. Okay.
The transfer of wild animals across continents. Basically the what is called zoonotic diseases. The spread of zoonotic diseases happens because of habitat loss.
Exactly.
And an increased frequency of interaction of human beings with wild animals that they actually shouldn't be anywhere near, right? And COVID is one example of what biodiversity loss can do to us. Climate change, I think now, whether it's a farmer or even an everyday average person living in an urban center, you could be in Spain, you could be in California, you could be in any part of South America, you could be in any part of India right now. You know that whether it is the rising heat, where the surface temperatures hitting 50 degrees centigrade, and you're a laborer working on a construction site or you're building a road in that heat, and what that does to your body, how unwell it makes you, how it causes sleep deprivation because these people don't have air conditioning at home, or the intensity of the cold, and what that is doing to every person. So the marginalized, those who are on the front lines of climate change, of course, will experience it very harshly. But even those of us with privilege, right? When flooding happens, it causes a loss and damages, whether it is physical human loss and damage, or it is possessional damage.
Right.
We've lost young people in flash floods.
Yes.
Doctors who've gone on a vacation and have suddenly been hit by a flash flood and died. And so I'm not even talking about, the devastating loss that Uttarakhand experienced with the flash floods and the thousands of bodies that were uncovered after the snow melted much later, right? We still don't have an exact body count on how many people we lost. And there are so many glaring examples of what climate change is doing, whether it is, the forest fires, and it's happening across states in the country. There are regions in our country where women spend 180 days walking to collect water because of the lack of access to water. Imagine, out of 365 days in a year, a woman is walking for 180 days to collect water. Now, how does that impact her livelihood? How does that impact her health? How does that impact the way she copes with her responsibilities, her family, the time she needs to spend with her children, or the time that she just needs to spend in recreation, or to focus on the things that she really cares about? So there are, I can give you many
Yeah,
examples.
exactly. Absolutely.
There are stark ones that I was able to come up with on the top of my mind. And I think what we all need to understand is that while we're talking about pollution, even with pollution, 21 of the most polluted places on the planet are in India.
Yes.
So it's not just Delhi, it's Bombay, it's Mumbai, it's many other cities. And there are reports now that have been published that say we've had the highest number of child loss of children who have died between below the age of 5 because of air pollution.
Yes.
There is growing scientific evidence on the level of damage air pollution causes to lung function, heart function, our overall well-being and health.
Yes.
And
I mean, the
think
doctors are even talking about the unborn babies, how they are, taking birth with affected lungs because
yes.
that's what
So,
they.
Saima, to simplify it further, to make it even simpler, a child, when a child is born, they don't have the lung function that you and I have when
Right.
we're fully formed adults, right? They're growing.
Yeah.
And with them, as they're growing, their organs are growing, their lungs are growing. They're building capacity. So how do we make children build lung capacity?
Yeah.
We make them play, we tell them to go outdoors, physical activity, proper nutrition, healthy air to breathe, all of that contributes to making their organ health strong,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Their organ grow to their full potential. What we're doing by exposing our children to toxic air from the moment before, even before they're born, till and right through their growing up years, is that we're impairing the growth of the organ.
Yes.
So their organs will never reach the full potential of their function, right? And and that itself is so bad because it's going to create all kinds of medical issues and development issues. And it's, to me, it's nothing short of shocking that we don't really, you did mention that people are beginning to see the link between health and climate. I don't think we're seeing it enough.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're seeing it in the way that it needs to be seen.
Yes.
Because if we did, we wouldn't let things continue the way we are. Air pollution has been a subject matter of deliberation, debate for over 47 years in India.
Wow.
We have front page newspaper articles from over 45, 47 years ago talking about air pollution.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that climate change accelerates the intensity of the pollution. Of course, a lot of people say that ye pollution climate change ki wajah se bada hai, which is not true at all because we're building more. There's construction dust,
Right.
there's wood dust, there's waste burning. There's so many contributing factors to that, and we don't have the systems to tackle those problems.
Right.
The Supreme Court has to say implement GRAP,
Hmm.
and that's what will bring the pollution down. But it doesn't. The pollution comes down by less than half, but to less than half when it rains.
Right. Right.
That's what it takes. It
Yeah.
takes for nature
Exactly.
to empower intervene.
Yeah.
There's literally days and I'm like praying, please God,
Yeah.
make it rain so that the
Yeah, everybody is just banking on a shower, one rain, because there is nothing else that will help the pollution. You're so right, Dia, that we are seeing this happening every year, every time we talk about it, but nothing moves, nothing seems to move. And I think every single person, of course, our policymakers, systems who have to implement these policies, they're responsible. But we also talk about our individual actions. I, as an individual,
we're going to come to the second part of your question, which is and that's one of the reasons why I didn't speak of human behavioral change when you asked me, what is the obstacle?
Yeah.
And I've come to understand this over the last decade and a half that I've been working in this space, that while of course it makes a huge difference, just imagine if 8 billion people decided to refuse single-use plastics or just start segregating and composting their waste.
Yeah.
What a huge difference we would be able to make.
Absolutely.
Or they started to grow trees and just reduce their wasteful consumption. But I feel, in my humble opinion, that then is absolving the responsibility that those who are perpetrating and creating the chaos, because human behavior takes decades, sometimes centuries, to change. And there is a very flawed system, a very flawed economic system that has made people behave a certain way.
Yes.
Right. And that behavior has changed only in the last 100 years. We lived very differently before that. Even if you just take India's example, we are we were a land that worshipped our rivers, our trees. We understood that natural resources are so precious that we are nothing without the planetary balance that supports life. And we are now the same people who are completely and totally dependent on a system that is delivering our soaps and our shampoos in little sachets, with absolutely no management system or responsibility on the producers to collect the waste that they're packaging our daily essentials in,
Right.
or our food and beverage in, right? And I'm talking about the most remote villages in India, Sayema. I'm not talking about urban centers that have some form of infrastructure.
Right.
Now, tell me, don't you agree that the policy, the systems, the governments, and the industries need to change?
Absolutely.
They control everything.
Absolutely.
They control our dreams. They control our aspirations. They control what we aspire for.
Right.
So, unless and until they change, nothing really will.
That's right.
Having said that, I do also feel that if every one of us could just go about life with this basic understanding that everything that we use in our everyday lives comes from the earth and should go back to the earth in a form that is healthy, we will make better choices.
Yes.
And if we can use whatever access we have to calling out or holding those who need to be held accountable, right? There's an activist in all of us, and we all need to become active citizens of our planet.
Absolutely.
And remember that if we truly love our families, if we truly care about the health and the future and the lives of our loved ones, we have to start taking certain basic actions.
Yes.
And those could be the spectrum of 7 actions, right? Ones that I've managed to take over the years, and I continue to with great. And I think the reason why I continue to take those actions is because it just helps me feel a little less despondent.
Yeah.
And the community of people is growing. There are more and more people doing this.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways that it strengthens us. But I think what has worked most effectively is civil society. You and me, just everyday people, using our voice, our platform, our ability to communicate and question and hold those who need to be held accountable, right?
Right.
So tag those brands. Ask them, why are you still using those horrible thin plastic tags with that tiny loop? Why? When you can use waste textile, when you can use coir, when you can use... There are so many other options to tag your clothing with.
That's right.
Why are you still using that plastic tag when you know that microplastics have reached placenta? This is supposed to be the safest place on the planet. A mother's womb.
Exactly.
The bloodstream of babies, the brain, the heart are... there's not a place on earth that is free of microplastics.
Yes.
So tag the brands. Ask them, why are you still using this? Change it. We will not buy from you if you don't. So yes, there is a power of the consumer where you can exercise the right to refuse and of course the right to question and say you can do better because the options the innovation exists and the options exist.
Right.
I think the second thing that every one of us can do is refuse single-use plastics.
Very important.
The third thing that every one of us can do is to be mindful of our resources. So water is a precious resource. Fresh water is the most precious resource.
Yes.
Fix those leaking taps, fix that leaking flush. harvest the water that is being, left from your air conditioning.
Yeah.
Collect it, use it to clean your house with it, water your plants with it. Take short baths, make them last the length of a song. I always use that as a cue with kids. But it works.
Yeah.
It really does. And the fourth thing that I think we can all do is segregate and compost waste at source. So whether you are a home, do it at your home, do it at your office, do it at your college, university, wherever you are. Just make that segregation happen and compost the wet waste. Because that wet waste, I mean, in my home, the compost is enriching the soil, the nutrients, the food that we're eating. We're growing vegetables. Our plants are thriving.
Right.
They're blossoming and flowering year round. It's incredible what compost can do. And people actually now, there are farmers in our country who are buying compost.
Yes.
This is not something that they should ever have to do.
Absolutely.
So whether you're a farmer or you're an urban dweller, you can make your own, what we call black gold. The fifth thing that I think we can all do is switch from regular bulbs to CFL bulbs.
Yeah.
LEDs. Switch from CFL bulbs to LED bulbs. And just in general, do the things that my dad used to scream at me about when I was growing up. Switch the geyser off. Don't turn it on during the months of summer. You don't need to have a hot water bath.
Right.
I have a, I have a regular shower through the year in Mumbai. I never have to put the geyser on because it never gets that cold. The sixth thing that I think we can all do and must do is interact with nature. Every day, find a way to spend time with nature. Heals you, it will do incredible things to you, and it will help you become more involved and more active in the protection of nature. The seventh thing that I think every one of us can do is plant more trees. Even if you plant one tree, each one of us just plants one tree and cares for it for the full length of our lives, we'd be making a huge difference. I know kids who've planted millions of trees.
Yes.
Young children.
Wow.
So these are the 7 actions that I think we can all take.
Lovely.
But I think at the core of it all is just that simple understanding that everything we use is a carbon footprint.
Yes.
Everything. Like the toothbrush in the morning, the process of brushing our teeth, the energy and the energy that was used to manufacture that item that you use, the energy that was used to lay the pipes to lead to the tap in your house, the energy that was used to make that tap, the energy that was used to make that sink, the energy that was used to make that bulb because you want to be able to, see your face when you're brushing your teeth. Right. The energy that was used to make the mirror that you're looking into. Just that one action that we do, imagine all the layers of energy that have been consumed to facilitate that one thing that you do in your everyday life.
Right.
And now multiply that with all the other things that you use and that you do every day, and the energy that all of that consumes. So, I think
absolutely. You've given us those pointers that I think every individual, even if we begin with a couple of them and then we, adopt 2 more, I think you have given us enough reasons to start to reconnect with nature, have that connection, and let's be friends forever. Dia, thank you so much for sharing your insights and passion with us today on Cool It Down. Your commitment to creating a sustainable future and inspiring others to take action is infectious, and it is truly commendable. There are many people I know personally who try and follow what you do. Somebody is not, ironing their clothes one day in a week. Somebody is trying to go back to, the basics. So thank you so much for what you're doing, how you're doing, and thank you for being on this podcast, Cool It Down. I think we need this, more than ever before.
Thank you, Sayema. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this conversation.
Today we are shining a light on a topic that's not just about the planet, it's about us. How does climate change affect our health, our food, and even our future? Joining me now is Alan Dangour, a global expert on the links between climate change, food systems, and public health. Alan brings not just expertise, but also a personal connection to nature that shapes his work. Together we'll uncover the hidden connections between the climate crises and our well-being and explore how we can all make a difference. Welcome to the podcast, Alan.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Alan, we usually think of climate change as something happening far away, like melting ice or forest fires, but it's also affecting us directly. Can you explain how climate change impacts our health, both physically and mentally?
Of course, and it's a really important question. I mean, imagine imagine a city in which, it's incredibly hot for large periods of time. Imagine a city where there are infectious diseases brought by mosquitoes throughout the summer. Imagine that city where it's really difficult to get food because of food shortages. So this is not a city way in the future. This is a city now.
Right.
The impacts of climate change, the way the climate is changing our environment, has a direct impact on your health, on my health, on our families and communities. So there's the direct impact, the extreme heat, and we've seen that this summer in India, throughout the world. You've seen extreme outbreaks of very hot weather.
That's right.
Which is having a massive impact on heat stress, the numbers of people coming into hospital with heat-related issues, and also on the impact on child health and on women and children working, especially those working outside.
Right.
So really big impacts. And then the other extreme weather, the floods and the droughts, also having impact. So we see those immediate direct impacts, but then we also see other ways that climate change is affecting health through, for example, the spread of infectious diseases. Those mosquitoes I talked about,
right,
they're spreading and they're bringing diseases like malaria and dengue and chikungunya to parts of the world which have never seen those diseases before, because
that's right,
as the environment changes, those mosquitoes can live in new parts of the world, live in different environments and thrive there. And that brings huge risks to us. And then, of course, our ability to grow food. You know yourself. If there's no water in your plant, the plant dies.
Right.
Well, with extreme heat and drought, where farmers in many parts of the world, and I've worked with farmers in India, really struggling.
That's right,
to grow their crops, and this is having a tremendous impact on food security, on the availability of food, on the price of foods, which is a real threat. And then finally, we don't actually know the impact this is having, this climate change and these impacts are having on our mental health, the mental health of children who are affected by these extreme events, but also of those societies and those cultures, those that are living in environments that are being changed radically by the climate. And the long-term impact of those changes on the mental health of communities is unknown, but it's likely to be extremely severe.
Exactly, and we're all witness to it. I mean, the unpredictability around even the change in seasons. Like, till a couple of days back, we were wondering when the winters will arrive, and it was just like last night that a lot of cities have just, suddenly gotten into the winter weather. So a lot of unpredictability also around climate change. Alan, we all love food. It's also a big part of the climate problem. You've worked on how food and health are connected. You just mentioned about it. How can we change the way we grow and eat food to make it better for both people and the planet?
Well, it's a really important issue. This connection between the food we produce, the food we eat, climate change, and our health, of course. And those things are very closely connected, and we're understanding more and more about that now. So the production of some foods is really bad for the environment. I mean, have a large largely the production of meat, animal source foods, meat and dairy and other things, they can, if poorly done, produce large amounts of emissions and have a very negative impact on the environment. Whilst other foods have a much lower impact. It tends, of course, to be the vegetables, the fruits that have a much lower impact on the environment. And those are, happily also very healthy parts of our diet. So, diets that are rich in vegetables and fruit and legumes and pulses, like like many Indian diets, in fact, are very protective of the environment and good for our health. So what we need to find is that balance of producing the foods that don't have a significant negative impact on the environment at the same time as ensuring that our diets are balanced and healthy and give us all the nutrients we need. But we are faced with this additional challenge, which is that it's becoming harder and harder to grow foods in many parts of the world because of the extreme heat or because of the drought. And therefore, we need those new innovations, those new technologies, which crop breeding, for example, so new varieties of crops, which are able to withstand these changing environments. And I know that in India, there's a huge focus on pulses and legumes and the millets of the world, for example. And they're really good in the sense they're not only do they have a low environmental impact, but they're also resilient to many of these new impacts of climate change on their ability to grow. And then thirdly, of course, they're very nutritious and good for health. So, we need those sorts of local innovations and as well as new science to really accelerate our ability to grow crops in these significantly changing environments.
Alan, you think artificial intelligence can play a huge role in maybe thinking about and planning the time when farmers can, take to the land and grow a certain kind of food?
Well, I think, what we need to be able to do is respond much more quickly to the threats brought to us by climate change. So whether that's our ability to predict extreme weather events or changing environments, or our ability to identify the crops that are best suited to grow in particular environments. There's a lot here that we can use the advances in technology that we have to really solve those problems.
There's this idea called One Health, which says that people, animals, and the planet are all connected. How can we use this idea to solve climate and health problems in a way that helps everyone?
Yeah, that's a really interesting challenge. I mean, and I particularly like it when I traveled to India, and I was recently there in Delhi at the end of August. There's a lot of focus not only on human health, but on the health of all living beings really on the planet. And I think that's really important because we are on this planet together, so humans and animals, and we all rely on the environment. So that's sort of that nexus of those three things: human health, animal health, and environmental health is really, really, really important to get right and to focus on. But we also need to recognize that environment is changing.
Right.
And that environment is now changing very fast. So the One Health approach, coupled with an understanding that the future and the way we're progressing because of climate change requires a different set of questions and requires us to think about the future, which is a climate-informed future. It's radically different, much hotter, many more extreme weather events, different weather patterns. That connection between human health, animal health, and environmental health becomes increasingly important.
Right. Alan, we know that you are a great baker and you love bird watching, but I want to ask you, did these hobbies come first or your love for nature came first? Because then I will be able to kind of, ask you about the connection.
Yeah, no. So bird watching has been something I've always done. I just think birds are the most remarkable beings. They are so extraordinary. Their diversity, their beauty.
And you mean birds with feathers, right?
But yes, definitely. But thanks for the clarification. I wouldn't want people to get the wrong idea. Yeah, birds with feathers. I spend a lot of time staring out of the garden, looking at the birds here. But then when we go on holiday or when I go abroad for work, I always take binoculars with me to look at the local bird species. I love them. And bread is another. The bread baking. My mother always baked bread when I was a child. But now during COVID, like many white middle-aged men in the UK, we all took up sourdough baking during COVID, during lockdown. And I've kept it on. I absolutely love it. It gives me time to think. It takes me away from the laptop, from the endless list of emails, and it's just a really nice time. And then you make a delicious loaf of bread and share it with friends. It's a really lovely thing to do.
And do these hobbies ever inspire your work?
Oh, without question. I mean, I'm very so. We have nesting birds in the back garden, and And when they don't turn up one year, it's I get upset. What is it? Is it the environment? Is it what have I done to the garden? Is it the changing? We don't put out enough bird food. What is it? So absolutely, I feel that connection with nature very closely, and we're very fortunate to go to Wales, a beautiful part of the country, for our holidays quite often. And there, it's surrounded by nature, surrounded by trees. And in fact, in Wales, where we go, there's recently been a lot of tree planting, which has brought back a lot of biodiversity and a lot of birds, and it makes it incredible. What that gives you is that hope.
Right.
That there is a potential. There is a future where if we look after nature correctly, you can bring back biodiversity. It's good for the planet. It's good for our souls as well.
Absolutely. Alan, we always focus in this podcast that we end up empowering individuals and people who are budding entrepreneurs. So I want you to take an individual's hand and lead him or her, towards making a change. What are some tips that you'd like to share for individuals to kind of, pledge towards making a difference?
Well, I think that's a really important way to end, Sayema. So thank you for that. And I think the key thing here is that we need to inform ourselves about the future. The future is going to be shaped, all of our futures are going to be entirely shaped by climate change.
Right.
And therefore, we need to be ready for that, and we need to understand what's going to happen, and we need to prepare. So number one, it's about preparing our minds for a future which is not just incrementally different from the past, but actually it's going to be quite different. So let's get ready for that. Let's think about how we live our lives. Let's think about, do we need to buy another jumper? Do we need to, go out yet again for another fantastic meal? Or, what about our lives? Can we just calm things down a little bit and recognize the impact that we all have on the environment?
Right.
And then thinking about, what do we really want? What do we as individuals, what power, what agency do we as individuals have to make a difference? And I think, I'm very fortunate, extremely fortunate in my role at Wellcome to be able to have the resources, the convening power, the team behind me to really try and make a difference about this intersection between climate change. But everyone has an opportunity to do something, whether it's talking to your school or talking to your local community or getting involved in some way with an activity to protect the environment where you live. I think it's really important that everyone engages with this agenda, and we all have a role to play. And I think it's essential that we all try.
That's fantastic, Alan. Thank you for sharing such valuable insights. It's clear that the connection between climate change and health is deeply personal and affects all of us. For anyone who's listening to us, today's episode reminds us that change starts with awareness and action. Whether it's the food we eat, the habits we cultivate, or the innovations we support, every step matters. Thank you so much, Alan, for joining us today.
It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, before we hear a lot more exciting stuff,
Dear listeners, you have a role to play in cooling it down. Please share your thoughts and suggestions about this podcast with just a mail away. Cool it down at in.bbcmediaaction.org or simply click the link in the descriptor of this episode. After all, we got to #CoolItDown.
it's a crucial link we cannot miss. Climate change is not just impacting our environment, but it is also impacting our health. And now on Cool It Down, you'll hear yet another powerful voice, Bhumika, a passionate advocate for understanding the ways in which our changing planet affects our well-being. Welcome to Cool It Down, Bhumika.
Hi, Sayema. It's an honor to be here and to have this conversation with you, this very important conversation.
Extremely. And I'm going to, start by asking you, what inspired you to focus on the connection between climate change and our health?
Truth be told, I don't think it's climate change and health. These connections are very apparent today, and not just to me, but I think all of us. No matter where you're sitting right now, if you're in one of the big cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, or in tier 2 cities, it's post-Diwali time, and a lot of us have already had, sore throat, and it is because of pollution. You can't deny the fact.
Yes.
We have just come out of heat wave. I mean, in fact, nobody ever imagined that even November is still going to be so heated.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yeah.
and it's not just about a certain individual feeling the impacts of climate change on their health, but all of us and all of us combined. I mean, all of us did have one or the other time fever during the heat waves, or other irritations during heat wave. But I mean, these are very obvious. I feel like these are very obvious, like climate change, how it's affecting our health is I mean, all of us know that it is. And even though I say it's affecting all of us, I want to reiterate that it's not affecting all of us equally. And
Right.
that's the place where my work lies, to be honest.
That's a very, very important conversation that we need to have, because I think we need to learn a whole lot of things when we are focusing on one subject. Of course, the most obvious is how it is impacting my health, but we need to look a little beyond and see how it is impacting maybe the health of the have-nots, the underprivileged people. And if this is what we are going through, they must be going through it 20 times more. So do enlighten us on that.
Right. So I could start by to start with, it is also different age groups that are affected differently. So sometimes it's not just about your material privileges, but also your also factors like age come into play. For example, children get affected differently, and elder people get affected differently during heat waves. But having said that, the core, I think one more thing that we have to also realize is, for example, when we talk of anatomies also, right? I mean, women are affected differently by a heat wave than men are. Women in agricultural field are affected differently than women working in urban centers, for example.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because
How? Can you give us an example?
absolutely. For example, a lot of us do have access to an air condition, or let's say a fan, right? But and all of us also, for example, what it took for you to go to the office or for me to come back to my house, we would probably sit into a transport system, maybe in a car or a bus and reach, an AC car or an AC bus and reach, the comforts of our offices or our homes, which are again privileges. We have the AC, we air condition, we have the fan, but
Yeah.
and this is what a lot of my reporting also is about. But women who are working in agricultural fields right now, for example, they're waking up early in the morning, and throughout the day, irrespective of what the temperature is, are spending their entire day outside. So somebody who's
fields.
spending more hours, in the field. So somebody who's spending more hours outside than somebody who's spending more hours inside.
That's right.
It's different
Yeah.
for both of us. But on the top of that, when we talk about workers outside or women workers outside, there are other factors that come into play. Whether or not they have the access to washroom. If they don't have access to washroom, a lot of women, including you and I, probably don't drink enough water sometimes.
Exactly, yeah.
Because we know we're going to do outdoor work, we're going for a shoot, or we're going to, any other thing. So we don't drink enough water at times. And even that, makes the heat wave worse for your body.
Yes.
And putting all of this into context, there are, during my reporting, I work as a photographer, as a journalist, and during my reporting trips, one thing that I kept listening from multiple women, but also specifically domestic workers, is when they go to work in somebody else's homes or in big buildings, I mean apartments, there are often separate washrooms for a domestic worker or for a worker, separate lifts and separate washrooms, right? A lot of time it's an unsaid rule that you're not allowed to use this washroom.
Which is
That
atrocious.
those rules
Let's
are,
just mention that as well.
it is atrocious and it is casteist. It is
course.
coming from an existing caste based mindset of purity, about what is clean, what is pure, what is mine, what is yours, so when a person from a certain community goes to work at another person's community home, or otherwise, or just generally, in a class society that ours is, we it's an unsaid rule that you're not allowed to use this washroom.
Right.
And a lot of women, because of that particular reason, and it has caste and class at the center of it and gender at the center of it,
Yeah.
do not, because of this reason, a lot of women do not drink enough water.
Enough water.
They're not drinking enough water, even though they have access to water. They're in somebody else's home. They're working as cooks, as domestic workers, but they're not drinking enough water, because what if this individual does not allow me to use their washroom, while even though I work here, or so these are many different ways in which heat affects a lot of us differently. To also take it one step further, a lot of times, especially, and you and I will understand, a lot of time when we go work out in the fields, there are times we do get UTI, we do get urinary infections.
Yes.
Because of the washrooms that we are using are not clean, or and multiple other reasons. And a lot of women, especially women working outdoors, working class women working outdoors. Somehow we only imagine a working class woman in a certain way because that's what our advertisements tell us, right? A woman going in a car or a woman in a suit, that's not a working class woman as a whole, right?
Exactly.
Agricultural farmers are working class women. Domestic workers are working class women.
And that's the major part of your population.
Absolutely, and when I spoke to some of the women, they who would also sell things on the pavement, and they were like, it's the pavement that is made of cement, for example, is entrapping a lot of heat, and when they're sitting on it, there's heat there, and it's not getting easier with one keeping one layer or a bori, and then sitting on it. It's just things that are not. And that causes irritation, that causes rash, and oftentimes when you sit for longer hours at a particular place and you're unable to use the washroom, it also causes UTI, it also causes infection.
That's right.
And we all have gone through fevers and other things. So it's, we need to realize how, just because we don't go and sell things or work out 24/7 doesn't, or during the daytime doesn't mean that there are other people who are not.
So I understand this, Bhumika. You have, I think, highlighted it in a very, very, what should I say, a very, very strong way, that climate change is not just impacting our health. It's actually impacting the health of the vulnerable, the underprivileged in a much more serious way. And we've been talking about all the physical, upheavals that they've been going through. What about the mental health? How is climate change affecting the mental health of people generally and specifically with the group that you work with?
Right. To give everybody a caveat, I am not a doctor or an expert on health. I'm a storyteller, I'm a journalist and photographer. So my experience, my understanding and knowledge comes from the people I've met.
Right.
And taking the example of the same woman who was selling on the pavement, she tells me a lot of people have become much more rude, during heat, and it's become harder to, I still remember she said, it's like everybody is irritated, and the saddest part is that sometimes someone gets to, blurt out their irritability while others don't.
Right.
And when somebody else is not allowed to put their voice out, or is not allowed their expression, even that affects mental health, so it's not just affecting people who are able to, who are being violent in times of extreme heat, who are, or otherwise, so that's heat is not just affecting our day life, but also our night life.
Right.
Like this year, we saw one of the hottest, warmest night of the decade.
Yeah.
You know, and and that also means that it's also affecting sexual life of so many people. While especially people who do not have air conditioning, and there's also, there were multiple reports, that there was also increase in domestic violence.
Right.
During intense heat or extreme weather events, as something that happens. In fact, why am I just talking about heat? Even though my work is corely about unequal heat, but even extreme weather events, other visual extreme weather events like floods.
Yeah.
There are ample reports about how a lot of young women are married off or sold during that time. There's some increasing sex work because there is no money to have daughters that stay in the home, or the already underprivileged person. When there's a flood and everything is taken away from you, there are times when people have had to sell their body to survive, have been pushed to human trafficking, have been pushed into sex work, and there are reports about, when climate change increases, this might happen. It's not might happen, it is already happening. And it's already happening. And I think more than anything, it's time that we also keep reiterating and highlighting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you mentioned the extreme weather events, and we used to say the extreme weather events, but I think that's become, the normal. The most part of the year, we are experiencing extreme weather events, whether it's heat wave or flood or pollution, everything is taking its toll. But Bhumika, climate change seems to also add a financial burden on healthcare. Can you explain how these increased costs from climate-related illnesses affect our communities and the economy?
Absolutely. So I'll take the example of I met multiple women in the agricultural field. I followed them throughout the year, but I'll take the example of one particular woman. Okay, and her name is Kamala. Okay, and so when I was in Western Uttar Pradesh, I was there. I was in a Dalit basti. I come from a Dalit community, and my nani also lives in that Dalit basti in Uttar Pradesh, and there were a lot of other women who had come, who had come to just relax, in that veranda of, as an open space there, and this woman, was extremely sick.
Okay.
Extremely sick. It was fever. Like she had fever, and she had fever due to the heat wave. But this woman, she kept reiterating that. I lost, in the past 5 days, I've lost a total of 1,000 rupees. And when I say that, I'll try to put it into context. This is a woman who works as a farm laborer.
Okay.
And financial burden, I'm talking about that, like our financial burdens also, like how much we can spend on health also comes from who we are, what our communities are, collectively, how much can our community spend on health.
Absolutely.
And otherwise, so this is a Dalit woman who's not, who is caste disadvantaged, who is caste oppressed, and has very little access to healthcare in that particular village or that specific basti, and she gets 350 rupees per day to work for the entire day in a farm, and most likely somebody else's farm, farm owner's farm,
Right.
and she works entire day, and she lost 350 rupees that day, and it was. And once you do not have money, once you lose that, 350 for 4 days continuously because you have fever.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about people who go to earn that money to live,
Yeah.
unlike some of us who can just order a food of 350 rupees at the quick of our hands from Swiggy, and another individual, again from another caste class location, comes to deliver it, at
Yeah, it's a
at our building
heart-wrenching ordeal. I
societies.
mean, she's really not talking about how unwell she's feeling, but she's talking about the amount of money that has gone, on treating the illness that she has. And you've put it brilliantly that, this is how it is impacting, putting a financial burden on our healthcare per se. And of course, communities are affected in so many different ways. Those little things we don't think about, those are under the spotlight today in this conversation. Bhumika, how can you tell us about some success stories now where communities have managed to improve their health by addressing climate change in some way or the other?
I'm glad you asked me this question, because most of the times, people only want to listen to one side of the story or not, the other side. So thank you for this question, first of all, and to answer it, I think, these very, when I talk about Kamala or this very woman, she herself is resisting through this extreme weather heat event,
Okay.
There are resilience and there is strength in ways that we cannot imagine, the way communities deal with it, and it is in the everydayness, people create their own solutions. For example, when we have, a thermos bottle full of, like a metal bottle, which will keep the water cold, for example, a lot of community members, a lot of women working in the farm, in the field, are, cover their own plastic bottles, for example, a Coke bottle or another bottle, with the piece of cloth, multiple layer of cloth, multiple layer of cloth, multiple layer of cloth, and they sew through it, and just so they can keep the water cold, So we also have to understand that like a lot of times disadvantaged communities or oppressed communities, which are oppressed by people within the country or system in itself. We often think that these are communities that cannot come up with solutions or are only disadvantaged or are only vulnerable. What we miss out mostly is that these are also the exact same communities that come up with solutions.
Oh yes.
That come up with with resilience. I mean, for example, even though we push certain communities into ghettos, and when I say that, I do mean when in India, a lot of Dalit and Muslim communities, especially from a certain class, are pushed into certain ghettos. It's not like they don't find their own solutions, Even within that crisis, it's they who find those solutions. And a lot of people who have access learn from those solutions and speak about them and write about them, I think like even right now, like instead of me, if Darshana Didi or Kamala herself would be speaking, it would make more sense because she'll have access, she'll know more solutions than I can ever tell you. But so I think there's a constant need to keep reminding ourselves also, in all of this light that nobody is a savior. Like we are no savior to anybody, and the disadvantaged or the vulnerable community is not just vulnerable. That cannot be their only identity, and we should look at these communities for solutions. They're the only community who does not use so much plastic,
right,
like a lot of people who order food online use. There's a disproportionate disproportionate intake and exchange. When we talk about certain communities, they use a lot more mitti ke bartan, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, fascinating tales of resilience.
Matke. And these are simple solutions that have existed. Jute, using jute. I can't tell you, I can actually show you, for example, this is one of the photos that I clicked during the farm. Of and this is Darshana Devi, and here she's wearing winter gloves in extreme heat. It is almost 45 degrees Celsius, almost 50 degrees, like reaching 45, somewhere between 45 to 50 degrees. And she's wearing winter gloves, just so she can, just so the husk of the wheat that she's harvesting doesn't go inside, doesn't hurt her.
Wow.
And like even though there's like and while I say this, I also want to give this warning to everybody that we don't have to romanticize it. It is also about the fact that we haven't been able to give
the proper solutions,
ample resources.
Exactly.
Ample resources. We haven't distributed ample resources collectively together equally. that people are resorting to other solutions which might or might not be the best solutions for them.
Absolutely.
But they're doing anything and everything they can to survive it, 1 year at a time. And also, for example, this in this very image only, you see Darshana covering her head with a cotton chunni,
Yeah.
you see Darshana wearing her husband's worn off shirt, because again because we live in a country where traditions are upholded, and certain dressing or what's suitable, what's not is upholded, and during that time, women come up with, like they take away their husband's shirt because that's a more practical garment to wear than a sari, which has loose ends, which could make you chumble in a field or otherwise,
Right.
So I think it all has to start from, like, I believe there cannot be climate justice without social justice.
That's right.
To deal with climate justice, you have to address patriarchy. You have to address caste. You have to address class. You have to address um, fundamentalism in various ways. And
Yeah.
you have to address all these things, and only then can we have a world where we have climate justice.
So I hear you.
Otherwise,
it
it's
is a
hollow.
holistic approach that we need to go at, and there are fascinating tales of resilience and survivors. They've managed to find solutions somehow. There are lots of lessons that we can learn from them, and there are lots of resources and facilities that we can provide and we must provide to them, so that they do not become the very first victims of climate change. Bhumika, what can we as individuals do to protect our health from climate change? We've spoken about communities, there are government policies, but as individuals, what is it that you think is the need of the hour?
First of all, it's important to read. First of all, climate change is not a singular thing. It comes in very many ways. It is affecting us in multiple forms constantly. It might be affecting us in ways that we might be unknowingly consuming more microplastics. Because of keeping our food or water in certain containers or otherwise, or the water that we're drinking, or heat. So there are different strategies to prevent your health being hampered from these extreme weather events that's happening due to climate change. So it's not just like how to, like, I don't think there can be a singular answer to how can one prevent getting sick from climate change, because somebody else might be getting affected due to flood.
That's right.
What can you do when there's sudden flood comes? What can you do when Yamuna is fully flooded upwards? But and which is why one needs to come back to to that one singular individual unit also.
Yes.
We have to because and this is where it's very important. It's even though we say that it's individual, one has to come back to individual. What I'm trying to reiterate is that we have to come back to individual for the collective, because there is no you will be saved and I will not be saved. Even though there is inequality, but
Right.
we all have to collectively work into like reducing certain things. For being more vigilant, about maybe the number of plastics that we are consuming or putting in our dump yard, adding to the dump yard.
So I would just interrupt here, Bhumika, because I want you to know that we're having many conversations across the board with a whole lot of practitioners and experts, and of course every single episode is reiterating that as individuals we need to do our bit, for sustainability, for addressing the climate crises. But today we're talking about how it is impacting our health, and I'm sure a lot of people tuned in would be looking for those little tips that you would have learned from the communities out there, how, like you shared, how do they protect themselves by finding a way. So as an individual, what can I also do to maybe prevent or save my health from, let's say, this pollution or heat wave in general? If you can give us those tips too.
To start with, when you talk about heat wave, for example, there is an urgent need. I mean, even and it's all again collective, because there should be more warnings. People should be aware when to go out and when not to go out. But certain other tips, like keeping yourself hydrated. Something as simple as keeping yourself hydrated constantly. Maybe having reminders to keep yourself hydrated. Having an umbrella when you go out. Going back to the basics. It is about that, going back to the basics in many ways. So I think even those minute, minimal things can also, help you overall to, like, be safe in a heat wave, maybe.
And we might as well add that, maybe carry your own water bottle so that you don't keep purchasing those plastic bottles and then, just throwing it anywhere and everywhere.
Absolutely. 110%.
Lovely. Bhumika, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's clear that the relationship between climate change and health is both complex and urgent. But understanding it is the first step towards change. For anyone listening out there, let's remember that every small action we take can contribute to a healthier future. We need to be empathetic. We need to think as individuals and feel as a collective and do more and more for our planet.
Sayema, can I just add one more thing?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, and while I say that keep reminders, keep yourself hydrated, I think also remember to keep the other person hydrated. It could be someone who comes at your house, someone who's delivering your order, anybody, but it only collective action can protect all of us, and there is no climate justice without social justice. So let's just keep everybody hydrated, maybe to start with, in a heat wave.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bhumika. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you, Sayema.
So it's clear the health of the planet and our own depend on how, as individuals and entrepreneurs, we are rethinking ways to cool it down. As an individual, there's always a choice we can make, whether it's saying no to single-use plastic or reusing, reducing and recycling, and start them young to foster connection with nature. For entrepreneurs, it's time to think of ideas and ventures that provide safe solutions and mitigate health concerns arising out of climate change. Put on your thinking caps and innovate, because we are together in this. Keep cooling it down. Alright, so that's it for this episode. This is your host, Sayema, signing off from another episode and leaving you with loads of ideas and hopefully things we can achieve every single day. I promise to be back with many more climate connections, business ideas and takeaways to cool it down, because we must.
Cool it down. Let's make it our business.